Today you will hear the story of Eleanor, a woman who was a model of success, but unfortunately not a model of happiness. Listen until the end and write whether you found Eleanor's story interesting. If you stood on the 48th floor of the Hudson Yards skyscraper at 7 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday, you would see the silhouette of power. Eleanor Vane. At 44, she was the youngest senior partner in the history of her private equity firm. Her office didn't have walls, it had glass, limitless, cold, and transparent. She wore charcoal gray wool that whispered authority and a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than most people's college tuition. Eleanor was a masterpiece of self-engineering. She moved through the world with the lethal precision of a diamond cutter. She didn't have bad days, she didn't have moods. She had KPIs, quarterly targets, and a reputation for being the closer. But inside the Glass Cathedral, Eleanor was suffocating. "I had built a life that looked like a temple of success, but it felt like a mausoleum," she says. "I was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar life that I didn't actually inhabit. I was a high-earning tenant in my own existence." This is the story of the success trap. It's a story for anyone who has ever climbed a ladder only to find it was leaning against the wrong wall. We are going to explore the sunk cost of identity, the phantom wealth phenomenon, and the specific moment involving a rain-soaked sidewalk and a stranger's umbrella that caused Eleanor to burn her life to the ground to save her soul. To understand Eleanor's crisis, you have to understand her programming. She was the daughter of immigrants who traded their dreams for her security. Her childhood was a series of checkboxes. An A was expected. An A+ was a relief. Love was a transaction. Results were the only currency her father accepted. "I learned early on that my value was tied to my output," Eleanor recalls. "I didn't have a personality. I had a resume. By the time I was 22, I had optimized my hobbies to look good on a McKinsey application. I didn't play tennis because I liked the sport. I played because it was the right sport for the rooms I wanted to enter." This is the first layer of the cage, the performance identity. She moved to New York in her mid-20s and treated the city like a battlefield. She was the first one in the office and the last one to leave. She lived on black coffee, cold salads eaten over a keyboard, and the intoxicating hits of dopamine that came with every promotion. She married Julian, a hedge fund manager, because they made strategic sense. Their wedding was featured in Vogue. Their apartment was a minimalist fortress of marble and white oak. They didn't have conversations, they had sinks. They didn't have dreams, they had 5-year plans. "We were a power couple on paper, but we were two high-functioning strangers sharing a zip code," she admits. "Our marriage was a merge, not a union. We were so busy building the Vane brand that we forgot to build a home." By 40, Eleanor had reached the summit. She was making $700,000 a year, plus bonuses that could double that figure. But the lifestyle creep had turned her into a high-earning slave. To maintain the Eleanor Vane brand, the burn rate was astronomical. The $15,000 a month mortgage, the $50,000 a year private school for a daughter she barely saw, the personal stylists, the country club memberships, the charity galas where she had to spend $5,000 just to be seen in the right circle. "I realized I was a high-earning slave to my own overhead," Eleanor explains. "I couldn't afford to be tired. Couldn't afford to be curious. I was locked into a high-speed lane because the cost of my success was so high that I had no margin for error. If I stopped for a month, the engine would seize." She describes the performance trap. In her firm, showing vulnerability was a death sentence. She had to be the Iron Woman, but inside her nervous system was shattered. She was living on cortisol and the fear of being found out. The fear that people would realize she was just a tired woman who wanted to walk in a forest without a phone. "In America, we celebrate the grind," Eleanor says. "But the grind is just a slow-motion car crash for your soul. I was spending my health to get wealth, and I was planning to use that wealth later to get my health back. It's the most illogical trade in the world." She tells the story of her daughter's 7th birthday. Eleanor was in Singapore for a deal. She watched her daughter blow out the candles via a Zoom call on a 12-hour time difference. When the call ended, Eleanor sat in her luxury hotel room and realized she had become a financial ghost, a ghost who provided the money but never provided the presence. The breaking point didn't come from a stock market crash. It happened on a rainy Tuesday in Manhattan. Eleanor was leaving a high-stakes board meeting. She was furious because a junior associate had made a minor error. Her head was throbbing. She stepped onto the sidewalk, her $1,200 shoes soaking in a puddle, and she realized she had forgotten her umbrella. She stood there paralyzed in the middle of the New York rush hour. Thousands of people were swirling around her, but she felt completely alone. She started to cry, not a quiet sob, but a deep, racking vibration that shook her entire body. A man stopped. He was an older man wearing a worn-out raincoat and carrying a simple, cheap umbrella. He didn't know she was a senior partner. He didn't know her net worth. He just saw a woman in distress. He stepped closer and held his umbrella over her. "It's just rain, dear," he said softly. "It can't hurt you if you stop fighting it." That sentence, "It can't hurt you if you stop fighting it," was the bullet that killed the Iron Woman. Eleanor looked at the man, looked at her skyscraper, and realized she had spent 20 years fighting everything. Fighting for rank, fighting for status, fighting to prove she was better than everyone else. And she was miserable. She didn't go back to the office. She walked into the rain, let her silk suit get ruined, and took the subway to a part of the city she hadn't visited in years. She sat in a small park and watched a mother play with her child. No nannies, no phones, just presence. Eleanor did what the board of directors called career suicide. She resigned. She didn't give a 6-month notice. She didn't take a sabbatical. She walked away. During the following months, she performed the Great Audit. She sat down with Julian and laid out the numbers of their life. "If we died today," she asked him, "would we be proud of how we spent last year?" Julian was defensive at first. He talked about the legacy, the potential, the targets. Eleanor wasn't listening to the business logic anymore. She was listening to her heartbeat. They made a radical, insane decision. They sold the Hudson Yards apartment. They sold the Hamptons house. They ignored the whispers of their social circle, who assumed Eleanor had suffered a nervous breakdown. "I didn't have a breakdown," she says with a smile. "I had a breakthrough." Eleanor moved the family to a small farm in Vermont. She traded her Patek Philippe for a reliable garden shovel. She traded her silk suits for denim and wool. As she unwound her life, Eleanor's relationship with money changed. She realized that her digital wealth, the stocks, the options, the numbers on the screen, were part of the cage. To feel safe, she needed something real. She started diversifying into physical assets. She began stacking physical silver and gold. "I needed to hold my wealth in my hands to understand its weight," she explains. Silver doesn't have a quarterly report. Gold doesn't care about a LinkedIn promotion. They are honest. They are timeless. They gave me a sense of security that a high-stress bank account never could. Eleanor is now 46. She works 15 hours a week as a consultant for nonprofits. Her income has dropped by 80%, but her quality of life has increased by 10,000%. She wakes up without a racing heart. She makes breakfast for her daughter every single morning. She knows the names of the birds in her backyard. She is no longer a power couple brand. She is a wife and a mother. "I realized that the American dream I was sold was actually a nightmare wrapped in gold leaf," Eleanor says. "Success isn't about how much you can accumulate, it's about how much you can walk away from and still feel whole. Money is a tool, not a destination. If your money is buying you a life that you need a vacation to escape from, you are overpaying." Take a look at your own Glass Cathedral. Are you the owner, or are you just a prisoner in charcoal gray? Don't wait for a stranger with an umbrella. Don't wait for your health to fail. You are allowed to exit the race. You are allowed to choose the ordinary life. Because at the end of the story, the only success that matters is if you were actually there to witness your own life. What is one thing you are holding on to only because of status? What would happen if you let it go today? Write a story you actually want to live, not a resume you want others to read. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.